Hey guys, so today I want to address the elephant in the room, which is the fact that every single YouTuber is actually bashing on vintage watches. As you know, the whole channel has been all about vintage, has been all about the fact that second-hand watches are pretty cool, and I love what I'm wearing. I would love selling those watches and the history of them and everything. All that being said, I think there's a big misconception of the quality of vintage watches and how well they can perform and how scary it is to actually buy a vintage watch. And I find that a lot of people in this industry right now are so afraid. They come to me and they're like, "Hey Chris, how am I sure that the watch is all correct? How do I know? How do you know?" I'm like, "Well, first and foremost, okay, we're in Canada, okay, and I'd say we don't have that industry of taking a watch that's all beat up and changing the dial or repainting the dial, recutting the case, and getting to the point of basically modifying a watch that was really horrible to begin with and making it really pretty. We don't have that industry here, so in a way I'm very protected. And when a dial is repainted or loomed or modified in any way, we kind of see it right off the bat. We see it instantaneously, okay? The scary part, if you go in certain areas of the world, is that they're going to take, again, a watch, they're going to repaint the dial. In certain cases, they do amazing jobs, including with Rolexes, including with vintage Omegas, Longines, whatever it might be from the era. And I can still see it, maybe not within a few seconds, but I'll take a loop and, normally you're going to see it within a few seconds by looping it, as we say, okay? Once you take the loop, you look at it, it's not going to be as scary. For a lot of people looking for the biggest deal of their life, thinking they're getting a deal instead of something that's of quality, what's going to happen is that you're going to look at, let's say, a reference that's really classic from Omega, okay? And you see them all at $2,000-$3,000 more or less, and all of a sudden you find one for $800 and you think you hit the jackpot, you're getting a deal, you're even gonna make money if you ever sell it back. The dial is looking pristine, you don't really know what polishing is or not, so you end up buying it and you come to a guy like me and I'm gonna tell you right within the few seconds I see the watch, hey, the dial was repainted, the case is pretty bad, the crown is not original. Sometimes you might have the original buckle with the watch, or people try to put buckles. The one thing that I see that's most faked on those vintage watches is the buckle. So a lot of people are going to tell me, hey, I have a Rolex buckle or I have an Omega buckle on my watch. And I'm like, it's not really real. Look at it. I'll show you the real one. I'll show you the one you have. We'll compare, and most of the time they're going to be like, wow, okay, there's a big difference. That's the scary part in this industry. You're going to buy watches and you're going to try to buy a vintage watch for the nostalgia, for the fact that maybe your grandfather had a similar watch, or your father, or you lost a watch that belonged to the family, or you simply want to get into it for not too much money. Look, there's not a way of cutting corners, okay? You want a proper modern watch that hasn't been worn a lot. It comes at a premium versus one that was very worn. Same thing with vintage, and even more so when you have a watch that's pristine versus a watch that's horrible. The price might be 10x, 20x, 50x the value versus one that could be, perfect. Therefore, you do have to become a bit of an expert, as I said before in other videos. If you're really looking into a model, compared, identical dials, there's a lot of information online. Not only on my website, there's many other websites out there. You can compare with pictures that are from known reputable sellers, from auction houses, from all sorts of dealers, and all of those resources are really important. Saying so, almost all my previous sales are on the archives, and you can see and compare pictures. All my watches have original dials. I never got caught, in terms of, hey, you sold a redial. I didn't, because I do my due diligence. I know what to look for. I'm not there to burn my name over a few $1,000s or whatever amount it might be. It's not worth it for me. Therefore, I know what I'm selling. I know what I'm doing. Then going back to the YouTubers, a lot of them don't even have any experience of owning such watches. A lot of people are talking about vintage, or talking about how, bad they are or whatever. They're inventing new stories every time, and it's kind of shocking because I have been making a living with this for over 15 years. And it's always the same shock to me to hear something like this coming from a fellow watch lover or fellow person who actually talks about watches. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. I'm saying almost everyone has the same projection of bad juju buying a vintage watch or whatnot. With my experience, okay, vintage watches mostly need a service. They mostly need a bit of attention. When they come to me after 20, 30, 50, 75 years of not running or being in a drawer or being in a safe or having been worn for a very long time. I've had watches that have been serviced 25 times in their lifetime. Every single signature was on the case back. All that being said, I never really had a bad experience with vintage watches myself. Have I ever been burned? I think yes, once. Buying a very expensive watch from Florida actually, and the dial had been reloomed, but the dial was correct. The pictures were taken in such a way that the watch kind of looked unpolished, but when it got to me, wasn't. It's an auction house. I'm not gonna name anyone. I'm not here to blast anyone. Look, it was on me. I should have done more of a due diligence on my end. Anyone can get burned, okay? I think I kind of set up the grounds to what I want to say is the fact that so many people got it wrong, okay? Everyone's looking, everyone's getting so excited by the new watches that are gonna come up at Rolex in the next couple of days. How many new models are gonna be there? What's the new color trend? Come on, guys, it's frustrating, you know, because all those watches that you are buying today, okay, and a lot of people, even in the comments, they're like, I don't care about tomorrow. I'm like, guys, you have to understand that you're not only living in the present, you're also gonna live in the future. Those watches that you're buying today, in 25 years from now, they're going to be vintage. You are going to be vintage yourself, okay? And maybe that nostalgia of owning what you owned 20, 25, 30 years ago, or something that you could never afford then, might be there for you, and you want to get that feeling that you never had when you were a kid. That happens with cars, that happens with paintings, with art, with watches, with anything from toys to basically a piece of furniture. It's memories, it's what you perceive, as a message from that object. And what does it mean to you? And a lot of people right now are living so superficially in that one moment that's now, that they totally don't understand that those watches that they're wearing or they're not wearing, thinking that their new old stock watch is an investment, that it becomes a bit of a nonsensical way of doing things and collecting things, which is not the case with vintage. Vintage has already had a life, or two or three or five, and to me it speaks the fact that someone trusts me. Like a couple of weeks ago, I went to see someone on nearly his deathbed, and I told him, the trust that you're giving me to actually buy your watches, that means more than any money I could make with the trust that I got from the person, from the fact that the person has collected so many years and it was mostly vintage watches. It has to mean something. There is that humanity part that you're never gonna get from the frustration of getting a brand new Rolex or a brand new whatever. You want an AP and you're looking for one, and then when you get it, well, it's too late. The hype has passed, or your excitement has passed. I never felt that with vintage. Vintage is a quest of acquiring stuff that you always wanted. That's so cool. That's what it is for me. With new watches, it's very cold. It's very much behind. You have to follow certain ways of doing things. I never really wanted to play that game. I never really wanted to get into that thing, even though I sold a lot of Daytonas, a lot of Pepsis, a lot of whatever, Batmans, whatever, all the Rolexes. I've had them all. But you'll never see them on my website. I never had that passion of holding that inventory and saying, hey, I have this. I wanna show you who I am, okay? Vintage speaks to me not because it's old and because I make a living out of it. It's also my passion. If you don't have any passion for what you're doing or for what you're collecting, just stop doing it. Stop having arguments for something you never even tried, you never even owned. It's beyond me to actually have to make this video after so many years of doing this. When I'm pouring my heart here and saying, hey guys, try it, put it on the wrist, live with it a few weeks, a few months at least, If you have a friend that has a vintage GMT, or, you know, even, I don't know, here, I have something really cool vintage Omega with a 30T2 movement. For a lot of people, I'm speaking gibberish right now. It doesn't really matter. Super cool manual movement from the 40s. But then the dial survived. It's a Gild dial, and the case is pretty sane, you know, and pretty good for the age. And it's such a timeless piece. You cannot have this with Omega right now. You cannot just go and say, hey, I want 10 of those. How many Batmans can I have? I could have 50 of them in the store. What's the point? What, to just say, hey, I have 50 Batmans? A lot of people tell me, hey, I came here to buy a watch, and now I have, you know, have the itch to actually want more and to discover more. The fact that all of you are just consuming the same type of media all the time is not constructive. Okay, I've been negative in a lot of my videos saying don't do this, don't do that, and a lot of people hated me for it. I'm saying it from experience. I'm not saying it from my frustration for what I'm doing. I love what I'm doing. I've always loved what I'm doing. And the hype, it's fun, but at the same time, not everyone wants to buy in the hype. I never got stuck really with a watch. Even though, yes, it might take a little while to sell certain ones. Yes, certain prices might be a bit high on the website or whatnot, but at the same time, every single rare piece has its price. I recognize that value and how rare certain pieces are, despite their size, despite their history, despite the fact that they're totally unknown to most of you guys. And I find that if the big ones or the big social media factors right now, like any YouTuber or any TikToker or any, you know, media like Hodinky is writing about something vintage, everyone just jumps on it. Like if it never existed the day before. Like, come on, guys. If you really knew about it and if you really read about it, you would have bought it. My biggest joke, I think, in the industry right now is that Louis Vuitton quartz pebble watch, I don't even know what it's called, and despite all of the media and all of the dealers that have sold those watches, and they used to be like $800 US or $600 US, and now they're like 10,000. It's a quartz watch, guys. Louis Vuitton never made quality watches. Louis Vuitton was never a quality watch manufacturer. Why would you spend $10,000 of your hard-earned money for something quartz from the 80s just to say, hey, I own one? Okay, whatever. It existed 2 years prior and no one was buying it. Just because a few guys have thrown you at it, you're getting all excited. There's cool stuff out there, guys. Look, and I'm not giving out hope. I'm not, you know, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying you need to do your own research. You need to be you. You don't need to be influenced by someone to tell you what to buy. If I tell you not to buy something, it's because I've seen that error or that mistake happen 50, 100, 200 times sometimes. And people come to me and they're like, hey, but I paid X amount for it. I'm like, look at what they're selling. I have the computer here. I can share it with the customer within a few seconds. And money is not an object when you like something. But vintage can be affordable. Vintage can be of high quality. From the movement to the case quality to the rare factor of every single watch, I'd say it's not better than modern watches. There's no better watch, one or the other, okay? But don't forget where we're coming from, because the watches you're buying today are going to be vintage tomorrow. And you have to understand that those watches are not aging as properly as the vintage watches. I've seen watches that are 2, 3, 4 years old, all scuffed up bracelets from Tudor, from Rolex, from Patek, from whichever brand, okay? But the newer watches, they tend to be very jewelry-like, very perfect. A lot of people take a loop trying to find flaws on a watch that's already 5, 6, 8, 10 years old. Certain people, I'm not going to name, even a customer today came in and he's like, should I wear this watch? I'm afraid of scratching it. Dude, just wear the watch. I don't care. Like, why do you have it? Well, I like it. I want it to be my daily. Well, let it be your daily. You know, like, if not, you know what? If you don't like watches, or if you're afraid of scratching your watch, just use your phone. Or I don't know, just buy G-Shock or buy Timex and they're good, they're amazing. You're gonna have fun with $50 or $100, $150, but don't tell me that, you know, the fact that you're actually buying a watch has to be an investment and you're protecting your investment. Anyway, I'm going a bit off course, but just to say, all those reasons that you're not wearing your modern watch and you don't want to buy a vintage watch because you're being influenced and people tell you, well, it's a lot of money, or it's not good because this, because that. Guys, have a bit of love for what you like. If you have a very high-end car, you're still gonna want to drive it, have those thrills. A watch is memories. A watch is everything from the birth of a son or a daughter to climbing a mountain, or, just the simplest thing. Hey, that day, was my birthday, or was whatever is something that connects you to the watch. The fact that you have been wearing it even whole lifetime doesn't have to be something valuable, but you're gonna be attached to that little piece of an object, okay, that's gonna mean something to you. And that's what vintage means. If you're always looking for the new trendy stuff, all those watches that you're buying today, who's gonna want them? And if there's no demand for the watches that you're actually buying today, your investment is worth nothing at the end of the day if you actually bought something and you're not able to get your money back, or part of your money back. It's a luxury consumer's market. So obviously most of those watches are going to lose value. So at least you're going to have something that you can sell back if you don't want it anymore, and change down the road. But if you come to a dealer like me or any dealer, there has to be a certain value. And if there's no interest for those vintage or to become vintage watches, then the market is dead. Why buy new watches if they have no value down the road? For me and for all the generations to come who are going to enjoy what we're doing here. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing a little bottle to the ocean right here and saying, hey, if you really would like watches, it doesn't matter if it's vintage or new. Sometimes I'm wearing watches, you're never going to see it, but sometimes they don't even work. I don't have time to fix my own watches, okay? But just the thrills and the fun of wearing a watch that I know has been worn by someone, or a military person, or whatsoever from the past, is much more thrilling than saying, hey, I just want to buy a brand new watch that I can just go take my hard-earned money and just go and acquire it. It doesn't have the same feeling anyway to me to say, hey, I'm actually acquiring something that's gonna last, and that's gonna last the next generations. Hope that video is helping you, and hope that the whole idea of being open more to vintage watches is going to, sparkle in your mind, not just for me, but for the whole entirety of the market, because everything that's being made today is going to be sold back on the market tomorrow for any reasons. I see people that need money, I see people that pass, I see sad stories. Any of that story or that attachment to that object is going to be part of it, maybe today or in 100 years. Thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed what I have to say about vintage. I feel that a lot of people got highly disconnected from the reality of the market, and where this market was predominant until maybe 7-8 years ago, the prices were not as high, I do agree, but today we're going to the other extreme that is not helping any better the market. And let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think. I hope you will like what I'm going to say about vintage in the next few videos, and there's a lot to talk about. Thank you guys. Have a great week.